Here comes the whole bloody earth. Westminster is the eastern district of London. Although the first part takes place in parts of Blackfriars, it's more iconic to just call the first part London. The second part of London matters a bit less since it's a part 2, meaning you can't vote for it unless you complete the first part of London. The reason why this map is split into 2 parts is that it would take way too long to load all the building pieces. You already see how much of a pain it is for roadblocks to load.
San Sebastian!
But the entirety of London? This is the follow-up video for a project that I originally overwrote on accident, alright. I did not know that 20 pages of raw text was equivalent to an hour's worth of talking. There will be a lot of context lacking regarding our heroes' initial adventure, and you should really watch my part 1 on the London campaign before consuming this. I do feel a bit bad about the part split, since it was very unnecessary, but please acknowledge that I'm very new to this form of content and very prone to overwork. Surprisingly, our heroes spawned right where they left off. That burning rubble at the back? It's a soda you guys punched holes into. Wait, how did you not get set on fire? From what I've read and perceived, Westminster is essentially the heart of blight-infected London. If we look at newspapers and clues that were scattered around the map, the government used the upper regions of the city of London as a quarantine zone, with the River of Thames acting as an impenetrable wall to separate the zombies from the healthy people. Another thing you'll notice is that it's currently nighttime, especially in comparison to London. This is because the story revolves around the sunset, with the Westminster Bridge being set to demolish at midnight. Every time our brave boys would complete an objective indoors, the sun would set just a little. It's a neat game function that displays just how much thought was put into this campaign. As we pass through the store, one of the soldiers reminisces on their memories.
Ah, St. Giles. This brings back my memories. My bottle of water, streets.
St. Giles, eh? St. Giles is a popular 7th century hermit, known as the patron saint of the disabled and beggars. But in London, St. Giles is an area close to the pathway our heroes are taking. Referencing his bottle of water, the soldier may have been a homeless alcoholic who lived on the streets here, and later on given forced military duty from a crime he committed since the kingdom needed all able bodies to help fight the war against the Antichrist. And also referencing the way he said bottle of water and not it also indicates that this soldier maybe Irish! This back street was a major quarantine site, as seen from the quarantine notices on doorways, as well as the X's marked on the more unfortunate doorways. I originally thought that the bloodied crosses were referencing the biblical Passover story, where the followers of Moses would mark their doors with animal blood, so that the angel of death would pass over the houses and not kill their family's eldest son. But turns out that this was a primitive quarantine strategy called shutting up, which was used in the Renaissance when the Great Plague came over. The crosses were a warning that the quarantine family who lived here had passed away. The quarantine papers were issued from the Office of General Health, basically the government. Other papers with the exact same crest are located warning people of the potential sites of the blight. But can someone tell me how you would be able to read this? Not only is the English extremely advanced, but it barely has any pictures. They really didn't think of the peasants who couldn't read, huh? This may have been deliberate. Yeah, since Westminster is nothing but a bunch of quarantine districts, it's easier just to skip over to the next segment. The reason why there were anvils on that platform was that the upper floor of the building our brave boys are going to pass through was a blacksmithery that focused on making cannons. The reason why it's on an upper floor is stupid, however. There is literally an industrial elevator installed, with anvils and cannons being lifted up and down. What about the threat of the floor collapsing? Have you no respect for your neighbors? Who has the strength to operate the cranking mechanism? Here's probably the most iconic objective of the Westminster campaign. A roof that's being under construction, with a crane meant to pull up supplies needed for building. Or demolishing? The government said in the newspaper that Westminster Beta was getting demolished. No idea why. Probably has something to do with the dead people rising from the earth and biting people.
Oh, my English tea bags!
This crane is designed for players to use, using a primitive hamster wheel mechanism to pull players down to their deaths. And also, probably, the biggest design flaw in all of Guts and Blackpowder. I have seen entire regiments die on this very jump. If you listen incredibly closely, you hear a man scream at the start of the crane objective. Yeah, this is the man. This man may have been a guide who got mauled by zombies. I have no idea why he's holding the disease parchment, though. How is that going to save you? Our heroes pass through a rotunda. I have absolutely no idea what this type of building is called, and I am unable to find any clues as to what this is. But regarding museums, its design is bizarrely ingenious. It's like a Georgian Google Street View. The second Street View is a lookout of Paris, specifically the Seine River. There's also an upper picture displaying the sights of Edinburgh. But unfortunately, the tour who went there got antichristed, so we can't see it. The design of this museum rotunda also makes it an excellent safe house, with bed sheets being present in the halls, as well as the second West Monster Energy respawn point being here. Since all soldiers have a guaranteed shot at safety when making it to Horse Guards, every soldier regiment you come across agrees to accompany your regiment. If they stay here and rot, they'll be cut off from safety. It's a very good plot hole, Dodge. But yeah, here's the museum so valiantly displayed on the Britannia Herald newspaper. Isn't it beautiful? A lot of you confuse this building for the National Gallery, which would make sense given it's in the way of our hero's journey, but the National Gallery and Bullard's Museum are two completely different buildings. Sure, the interiors do look a bit similar to one another, but the National Gallery is an art gallery containing Britain's precious paintings, while Bullard's Museum is a small and independently owned museum, as seen from its lack of rooms. But nevertheless, it's a good place to lore dump, fit for my devouring. The National Museum's first display is that of taxidermized animals, delivered straight from Africa, and this is good attention to history. The scramble to Africa was the mass colonization of the African continent by Western powers during the late 1800s. Although this is way after the events of Guts and Blackpowder. But in the 1810s, British soldiers were still present in Africa with limited holdings over the continent. If we want to get historical, Britain founded a colony at South Africa named Sierra Leone, which acted as a trading post and a sanctuary of refuge for escaped slaves. The British Navy would house bases at the colony that would patrol the African seas to sink slaver ships. The creatures present in the animals exhibit include elephants, gazelles, mycat rufus, lions, and rhinos. There are also birds present, such as that of the flamingo located in parts of Africa, as well as the African ostrich.
What the fuck? You're walking a fucking ostrich, you daft.
The African wood owl, or maybe it's a barn owl, and what do you think this bird is? There are also Georgian illustrations of other animals,
Like the platypus.
which is native to Australia. Which is good attention to detail, since Britain was also colonizing Australia at the time. But the builders couldn't add anything else though, since they cleverly hid the other exhibit away with blankets. Ooh, I'll get you next time, builders. Oh yeah, here's the main part of the museum. On the back, we have iconic medieval British weaponry, displays of war axes, sabers, shields, and spontoons. alongside a model horse with armor. There's also a mascot knight who was intended to either scare or stand and pose for museum visitors. He is a zombie now, but the blight, the disease that zombified him, retained his memories, forcing him to an eternal hell of
Working 9 to 5. What a way to make a living.
To the right, there are salvaged Napoleonic war artifacts, mainly consisting of a regiment's flag. This flag is that of the Empress's Dragoons of the Imperial Guard, a heavy cavalry unit who saw combat in the battles of Friedland, Berezina, and Leipzig, with their final conflict present at Waterloo at the hands of the 7th Coalition, which were an army made up of Brits and Prussians, commanded by Arthur Wellington and Field Marshal Gebhard von Blücher. You can play as this regiment if you buy Regiment Pack number 6 in the Game Passes. There's also a French officer's saber, a French cuirassier helmet, a toilet, and a dead French guy. And to empathize on how much more the English hate the French, there's also a major display in the center, which was obviously what the Britannia Herald newspaper advertised, depicting how the Chad British fought valiantly against the fanboy French, who let themselves get pounded by the little zombie fireworks. You can play as this Chad Cuirassier in the British Cuirassiers Regiment. But here's a minor detail that may shock you. There is also an exhibit detailing the sinking of the Cruiser. In the 8th of July, 1815, just a few months before London, which is set in September 21st, 1815, only 2 months after the Denmark campaign takes place, Denmark fell to the blight, which according to Britain was called capitulating, meaning that Denmark is now a threat to all European nations, which the Kingdom of Sweden pressured Britain to firebomb the fallen mid-Danish city. By the 3rd of July, a fleet was sent under the command of Admiral James Gambier, an actual person who existed and played part in the Napoleonic War, by the way, to firebomb and burn the city to the ground, for the British deemed that no soul was left alive there, and all living things there were considered afflicted by the blight. But on the evening of the 7th, ironically by some miracle, a small vessel of Danish soldiers managed to take fire on a brig sloop. The fact that the boat was so low and close to the water, the British ships were unable to fire all of their cannons on this boat, allowing it to escape. Yeah, this campaign is linked to the Copenhagen campaign. I know there are 2 other exhibits, but they aren't as notable as the ones I talked about. Let's let our brave boys proceed with their adventure. Going outside, our brave boys find themselves at the statue of King Charles I. Notice again how all of the highways are sealed off or barricaded. That Westminster was a prime quarantine site. And also notice how they made the statue of King Charles bald. This is to prevent pornography. This area is the Trafalgar Square, or Charing Cross, named the Trafalgar Square after the monument erected there in the 1840s to commemorate the British victory at Trafalgar. There are also some fools in the square who are undergoing public humiliation. It was a popular punishment for criminals in the 1800s. Other cultures had their variant of their own form of public shaming, but in Britain, the pillory was an effective method. Passerbys were allowed to throw things at the criminal, yell at the criminal, but I've never heard of someone wanting to bite a criminal. Did you remember the fools sentenced to the pillory in the Sandpiper Dispatch? Yeah, these are those fools. There were actually 4 fools that were displayed, but they were dumped elsewhere in the Charing Cross. But these men were Andrew Jones, age 27, for looting, Mark O'Reilly, age 20, for unrest, Scott Graham, age 17, for extreme looting, probably the only ever child character in Guts and Blackpowder, and Francis R. Scott, aged 38, for killing somebody, soon to be fully sentenced. Yeah, one of these zombies may be canonically a minor. Let that sink in. Since our brave boys were soldiers, they were able to pass through the gate. But, you know, not before doing a little point defense in the game, because, you know, added difficulty. Fun fact, the gatekeeper's facial model is that of Francis for Left 4 Dead. A lot of London Guts and Blackpowder secrets credit Left 4 Dead, as it may be an inspiration that led to the development of these adventure campaign maps. For some reason, once the gate opens, there's a cutscene of some NPCs dying from a zombie horde. Distressing given the adrenaline going on, but what are these, the horse guards? Is this the message the gatekeeper was going to relay? Is this supposed to distract us from another cutscene of a horse guard getting mauled by a horde of zombies? But yeah, here's the horse guards. See their blueness? Wow! I risked all my life and all I got was a dead horse guard. Upon entering the building, unfortunately to our hero's dismay, the entire building has fallen to the undead, with barricaded walls erected to block doorways that once housed humans. Slowly losing morale, our heroes meet an unexpected character. Arthur Wellesley, the first Duke of Wellington, the prime bloody minister. Not only being of Irish descent, but also a prominent military figure, serving twice as the Prime Minister of London. In 1834, long after the event of Guts and Blackpowder. But in 1815, he is still a powerful political figure, being the Duke who commanded a British army which, alongside Gebhard von Blücher, the General of Prussia, the guy who dies at Cambrai, defeated Napoleon at Waterloo. In real life. He also invented gumboots, nicknamed the Wellington boots, by requesting a shoemaker to redesign the Hessian boot, which were riding boots. Assuming that he saw the first zombie encounter at Waterloo Hugo Mount, I theorize that because of this, Wellesley was put in charge of dealing with the new zombie threat. Given all that he had seen and experienced in his life, he was clearly the best candidate for this role. After the fall of Belgium, London, Arthur Wellesley would fall into a deep depression, locking himself up in his office and hating himself. This can be seen from the blanket covering his own painting. Or is it a painting of the king? Yeah, I don't know. But given how the builders deliberately made the blanket slightly transparent, it does display a bit of storytelling. When you first meet, he pulls a gun on you, calling you scum.
Scum of the earth, really.
Hi! Editor Jimmy here! Upon researching into Wellesley, I actually realized this was an iconic line he said in the Napoleonic War. The term scum of the earth comes from Wellesley's opinions on soldiers who break formation for selfish reasons. This came from the Battle of Vittoria, near San Sebastian, which the British soldiers would plunder abandoned French wagons despite strict orders not to. This lack of discipline greatly angered Wellesley, who commanded the army at the time, who wrote an angry letter to his higher-ups saying that, "We have in service the scum of the earth as common soldiers." He knows your regiment is not supposed to be here because militarily, you are supposed to die at St. Paul's Cathedral alongside the people you failed to save. But since Arthur is depressed, he gives you mercy. Although Wellesley has given up on his country, our heroes still retain hope for the crown. Alongside the sniper they killed. They still want to do their best to serve their country, which impresses Wellesley. So he gives them their new orders. Our heroes are tasked to merge with the men of the Royal Wagon Train. This sounds like a regiment, but it's just a British elite way of saying the guys are ordered onto wagons. Their objective is to take the scenic route alongside the Royal Park and cross the Westminster Bridge before midnight. Because he ordered the regiments on the other side of the bridge to blow up the, how many times am I gonna say the word bridge? The men of the Royal Wagon Train were the last few scheduled reinforcements that were supposed to aid the security of the South Bank, a part completely cut off from the main London, and is uninfected thanks to the security of the River Thames. Wellesley also hands you a flag, ordering you to deliver it to the men on the South Bank. This is a king's color. The king's colors. Basically a sacred flag. These flags were vital rallying points for Napoleonic combat, basically symbolizing national duty and regimental identity. Doesn't mean much, but this is actually the most iconic scene in all of the London campaign. Matter of fact, Guts and Blackpowder in general. The reason why Wellesley didn't just hand the flag to the men downstairs, but instead to our heroes? It symbolizes his newfound hope for the country he failed. Seeing how our brave boys, fighting through hell and back, the losses and sacrifices, their blood-stained blades, their blood-stained gloves, their tourniquets and battle scars, it gives Wellesley just a little bit of hope. Hope in the country that he failed. Hope that despite all this failure and betrayal, his soldiers still look up to him. Wellesley is written to be a stoic, emotionless man. Development would want to display his newfound hope in a way which fits his character, which is the symbolism of the flag. By bearing the flag, our heroes also bear their duke's hope for Britain. If a player chooses to stay with Wellesley, a secret exchange is unlocked.
We would have held hell at the gates. A great deal of your commanders decided it was worth more to retire to the protection of their estates than to face them. Some say cowardice, treason at the highest level, but the king will reward them with medals of the highest honor. So will the people, the defenders of London. Good night, sir. Die, you...
I told you before that Wellesley is depressed. His emotionlessness, his lack of self-esteem, his feelings of betrayal stem from his disappointment at his kingdom's decision-making. Being in charge of the war against the Blight put a great deal of stress onto Arthur, and with the Blight's infection of London, it was a climax of his sanity. You can see his stress present in his receding hairline. His plan of protecting London against the zombies was flawless. His ability to strategize, thanks to his years of service as a military commander, had given him the experience and expertise necessary to bear the burden of defending London. But he was betrayed. All of his fellow commanders betrayed both Wellesley and Britain by letting the infected overrun their country, retreating to their own estates to let their people die. Wellesley, as an elite, knows that the elites are just going to brainwash the media to make themselves look more appealing, and stripping their names free from their cowardice. Originally, Wellesley was ordered to defend Belgium, a country very close to the British island. But given how zombies reached Paris and the Catacombes de Paris campaign, this military intervention failed. I believe, though, the king pardoned Wellesley for this, though, because he failed a foreign country. He was royalty, and by letting Belgium fall to the Blight, France will fall to the Blight too, which was an epic British W. But letting London fall to the Blight? Treason of the highest order. Not only did Wellesley fail Europe, he failed the last bastion of hope against the Antichrist, Britain. The kingdom doing literally all of Europe's quarantine work. This, you see, is a broken, defamed, guilty man, a traitor, a failure, and a loser. Very different to his real-world counterpart. There is only one thing he can do left, and that is to give his people hope and go out as a hero. By dying with Wellesley, you get the rare objective criticizing how you abandoned your team. Our brave boys, through all odds, despite their hardships, finally reached the end of Westminster Bridge, finally being regrouped with their own men. Through grit and determination, through willpower and British camaraderie, they overcame their flaws, the madcaps of London. So yeah, the London campaign is a masterpiece, especially for a Roblox game. Conventional maps never had this amount of storytelling, aside from, of course, the Roscoff campaign. But while Roscoff is a military rescue operation, London is much more. It conveys not only the country's culture, but a large turning point in the war against the Blight. Our heroes may have been deserters, but they gifted Britain what it most needs at its worst days: hope.